Well, joining me now to take a look at what can be done to address the crisis facing Canada's 44,000 canola producers are three MPs who are at today's Emergency Commons Agriculture Committee meeting. Francis Drouin is a Liberal member on the committee, and he's the MP for the Eastern Ontario riding of Glengarry Prescott Russell. Randy Hoback is a Conservative MP for the Saskatchewan riding of Prince Albert. He's on the International Trade Committee, but he was at the Agriculture Committee today. And Alistair McGregor is the NDP member of the committee, and he's the MP for the BC riding of Cowichan, Malahat, Langford. Yes. Welcome, all three of you. I want to get to, just briefly, there was quite a dust-up in the committee about inviting the ministers in. And Francis Drouin, you changed the opposition motion and struck down having ministers. The Minister Freeland, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Agriculture Minister, Minister Bibeau, and the International Trade Diversification Minister, Minister Carr, appear. Why did you strike them off the list?
So the International Trade Committee is going to hear from Minister Bibeau and Minister Carr on Tuesday. What we don't want to do is double or do the same work that the International Trade Committee will do, and I'm sure my colleague will disagree with me, but I think it's important to hear from industry to come forward at our committee, and I think it's a good chance for us to hear from producers as well. What we can do as an Ag Committee is actually look at the programs that are available to them, and if they're not, then how can we solve the issue? Worst case scenario, if this issue is not solved within the next few months, then we want to make sure that farmers are potentially compensated, or they have some revenues coming in.
Okay, Randy Hoback, you are at the International Trade Committee, and you'll be hearing from two of the ministers, Minister Carr and Minister Bibeau. The argument is there that would be just duplication.
Well, it's interesting. It's duplication, yet they have CFIA going both to the Trade Committee and the Ag Committee. So if you have the officials going to the committee, why not have them the minister? So why be selective in that case? Reality is the only people that can provide information on this file are the ministers. The reality is this is a political issue. We'd all agree that this is not a quality issue. This is actually an issue where we need to have a political solution. So that means you need the ministers involved in these files, and we need to know what their plan is. The other reality is spring plantings right now. In southern Alberta, they're taking their drills out and getting ready to start. If they need to make a shift in acres from canola to something else, they need to know that. So they need to know that this government's got a plan, that they've got an agenda or a process moving forward that will actually rebuild that relationship with China and bring this market back to normality, so that they can actually know in the fall when they go to harvest that crop and sell it, they actually have a market to sell it to.
Okay, Alistair McGregor, I'll start with you. What are you hoping can be done then? Because a lot of Canadians are watching this and they're saying this is bad. This is China stopping all imports of billions of dollars worth of canola. What are you hoping can be achieved by your committee and by hearing from government officials?
Well, I mean, to echo Randy, I'd hoped that we'd have the ministers there because I believe the buck stops with them. As to what can be done, I mean, I think ultimately we will hear from departmental officials, but really when you see that 40% of our canola goes to China, and this is a country that has a very well publicized record of flaunting WTO rules. They often use their trade agendas to further the interests of their state-owned enterprises by grabbing strategic assets and strategic resources of other countries. And I think what we have to take a look at is, first of all, what kind of contingency plans were in place or can be put in place, because I don't think this is going to be the only occurrence of this. Yes, this is happening with canola at this occurrence, but what if it happens with another major agricultural product in the future? I want to see what kind of contingency plans we can have, because 40%, we're not talking millions of dollars, we're talking billions of dollars. And as Randy said, farmers have a lot of uncertainty. They need to have that certainty months, sometimes a year in advance.
Francis Drouin, the Prime Minister has talked about a potential high-level envoy or trip to China to make representations on this. We do not have a full-fledged acting ambassador because Mr. McCallum has stepped down. What's in the works, and how long might it take to get a high-level delegation to China to talk about this? Seriously about this?
So we already know that CFIA has been in contact with the Chinese government last week and this week on technicalities, because the issue of non-compliance is a technical issue.
They claim there's impurities in our exports, but we've gone through this 2 years ago.
I know. We know our canola is safe, but we still have to, there is a process in place. We still have to participate in that process. That high-level discussion and that high-level delegation, I don't know who will participate in that, but I do know that the Prime Minister has said he wants to do that. I know that the Minister Carr and Minister Bibeau were meeting with canola growers today in Saskatchewan. So they're figuring out what potentially they could do to help farmers. At the end of the day, it's important to make sure that farmers who will be impacted by this and who are impacted by this get the proper support they need, and we'll continue to work on this issue
I'm going to fast forward it. How important is it to escalate this quickly to the top levels? Because we saw, and I think your two colleagues will attest to this, we saw 2 years' worth of the same toing and froing, the Chinese saying that there's impurities in our exports, us proving it beyond a doubt that there weren't. It took the visit in 2016, high-level delegation, Chrystia Freeland, and the Prime Minister to actually strike a deal where the Chinese admitted, no, okay, things are all right. So if we're going to get past a political situation, how long before we get a high-level delegation?
I'm sure they're working on the high-level delegation as quickly as possible.
Okay. Yeah. Randy Hoback, what are the other things that can be explored? I know we heard from Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe asking for change in agricultural subsidies or credit programs.
You know, you can look at the cash advance program, and I understand they announced that today, increasing the limits and actually looking at the ability to have the advance on existing crops extended out, and then the new advance for the new crop, you know, which is secured by crop insurance, issued so that farmers don't have that cash flow crunch. But, you know, there's so many other things that should be considered. And it comes back to that's why we needed the ministers to come back into the committees. There's things that we could have offered for suggestions in committee as members of parliament that would have actually made things better. But with them not there, there's no mechanism for us to get that information to them. There's no mechanism to understand the challenges they're facing. And when you go back to the farm community, they want to know what's being done. They want to be able to have confidence that things are in process and in play to fix this problem. So we don't have an ambassador. I don't know if the Prime Minister's called the Chinese ambassador yet. I don't know if the CFIA officials have asked for an invite to go to China to actually present their findings to compare to what the Chinese officials are saying. You do have to, you know, check that box and get it behind you. But they're basically saying this isn't the issue anyway. It comes back to politics. It comes back to the Prime Minister's disastrous relationship with our markets and the farmers now paying for that disastrous relationship.
Okay, moving down the panel, Alistair McGregor, what do we do when this is profoundly a political, most people agree it's profoundly a political situation? A retaliation, if you will, for the detention of Meng Wanzhou.
It's really tough because when it becomes a political issue, that you're left with a much less certainty. Because if this was science-based, then we would win. Yeah. We know the CFIA, sometimes our farmers like to grumble that the way CFIA does its inspections are a bit onerous, and that's true. But on the other side of the coin, it's CFIA's thoroughness that gives Brand Canada that kind of scientific edge in the international community. People know that when they are buying a product with the maple leaf on it, it is assured by quality and the highest standards. And so we will win that argument any day. But with a political question, I think we have to look to our allies and who have also been affected by trade actions from China. And we have to band together and figure out a solution of how we confront this giant market together.
Okay, briefly.
And I think you have to also look at the factors of what's happening here today. The reality is the Prime Minister is talking to Chinese officials in Huawei, and they're saying, you know, the rule of law is the rule of law is the rule of law. We don't interfere with the rule of law. Justice and political are separate. They're telling the Chinese that in one room. The next room, they go to Jody Wilson-Rayburn, the former Attorney General, and say, you need to interfere. And that all becomes public. And the Chinese say that and say, well, wait a minute, if you can interfere in this, why can't you interfere in ours?
Okay, which brings up one last question just in 20 seconds. Francis Drouin, this is off topic, but it's very much germane. Jody Wilson-Raybould, you're having a meeting next Wednesday, caucus meeting. There are a lot of MPs, Liberal MPs, who are talking about having a vote on whether Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott should remain in the caucus. There's a suggestion they will force a vote. Where do you stand on that? Should they remain in caucus?
Well, listen, for any party, I would say that if members of Parliament cannot express their public support for a Prime Minister or cannot express their public support for the Liberal agenda, for, in my case, or the Liberal Party of Canada, they have to second-guess whether or not they really want to be in our party. And I'll leave that question up to Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Ms. Philpott.
But they have both expressed non-support for the Prime Minister.
Well, we'll see what happens on Wednesday. There hasn't been an official letter sent around what caucus members will do, and we'll see what happens on Wednesday. But for me, a caucus member should be able to express their public support for the Prime Minister and our party.
Okay, that's a long way from canola, but I want to thank you, all three of you. Thank you very much for coming in. Good luck on this file, on the canola file. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.